Welcome everyone. This is Debbie Maybear with National Kitchen and Bath Association. You're here for our final webinar of the month on smart home and tech. And today's session is called Lightsabers and LEDs for your kitchen. And Keith Harrison is with us. He is with Total Home Technologies. He has 3 offices in New Jersey and New York City. And I know that he is ready over there to get started. So I also want to just quickly thank our sponsor, Control 4. And Keith, we are ready to get started. Thank you so very much.
All right, I think we still have a minute or so. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me. It's coming through?
You sound good. Thank you.
All right, all right. I'll wait another minute. So it's exactly on the hour. Looks like we have almost 100 people. Fantastic. As we go through this, if I bring up a topic or I start talking about something and everybody doesn't seem to understand it, I'll happily stop and explain it or do the best I can. So real quick, I'm Keith Harrison from Total Home Technologies. I founded this company in 1992. So I've been doing this for a minute or so. My contact information is up there, and my website is www.totalhome.tech. Probably can figure that out from the email address. We are a Control 4 Pinnacle dealer, and we have 3 certified showrooms in the New York, in the Manhattan and New Jersey area. I call this LEDs and lightsabers because I kind of think people don't understand either one of them. They're both kind of a mystery. When I talk to people about LEDs, there's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of misunderstanding. So I'm a big believer in taking things that you like and combining them together. So as you can see in the background, I love snowboarding. I also love engineering and rockets. That's what I went to school for. So I like taking things that I love and putting together. This was my 2 minutes of fame on the internet, and this is actually real. That was my rocket-powered snowboard. That's the one on the bottom right there. But on to lighting. The history of lighting. Well, we cannot improve something unless we can measure it. I think Nikola Tesla said that originally. Let's play a game, and anything worth doing is worth keeping score. So I got these slides right before I started this presentation. No exaggeration, I got these about 35 minutes ago. I found this on Instagram. Don't do this. I can't believe this is real. I didn't see this for myself, but I had to throw it in the presentation just because this is the worst example of wall acne that I've ever seen. How did we get there? So if we started the history, a minute before we had the electric lamp, we had candles and oil lamps. They've been around forever. They lasted until the early 1900s. They were simple, they were very low tech, and they could be made from just about anything. You can move them around. There's a lot of really good things. And really simple, really elegant and beautiful. I mean, here's a great example of an original sconce, right? But, so you could read at night, awesome. You could carry it with you, but it was hard to start. And there was that whole pesky issue with fire, really bad. Move on to the electric lamp. Adoption started in the late 1800s. When it was invented, it doesn't really matter, but we started using it in the late 1800s. It's still used today. It was meant to mimic the natural light, and a lot of the problems went away. These are beautiful. I mean, you know, original lamps with Edison filaments, awesome, right? Some other great photos. They were safe. They're easy to turn on and off, but you couldn't carry it with you, and you had to run wires everywhere. So some good things, some bad things. Then there was the wall switch. Now, having a switch wasn't new, but putting it on the wall was. When the electric lamp was first adopted, you put the lamp in the room and you plugged it in the wall and the switch was on the lamp, and that was it. Somebody said, hey, let's put the switch on the wall. And these are some early original wall switches. It was a lot of fun researching this and finding these old. And one of the great things about these wall switches is when you look at it, you know exactly what's going on. Press it on the top, it turns light on, press it on the bottom, it turns light off. We don't necessarily have that today anymore. As time moved on, they changed, but the concept is the same. And I remember the one on the right being in my gym when I was a kid. So it was great that we could turn the lights on from the door, but we created something called cascaded switching. We're all familiar with this. It's when you turn the light switch off from the lamp, and then you can't turn it on from the switch on the wall. And that's not acceptable, right? Never accept cascaded switching because it creates a poor user interface, and you don't know when you can turn the light on and when you can turn the light off. But we created that problem when we added the wall switch to the floor lamp. Then somebody had the great idea of, hey, let's build the lights into the room. Awesome. And we came up with chandeliers and sconces and ceiling lights. And here's some simple examples of them, right? We've all seen ones like this before. The great thing is we got rid of the cascaded switching problem, right? Turn the switch on, light turns on, there's no switch on the fixture. But you couldn't carry it with you, and you might not have light where you need it. Then we added the dimmer. Adoption started in the 70s, mostly retrofit. Here's some examples of some dimmers. One of the problems is sometimes the user interface wasn't as good, right? You didn't know you couldn't look at that round dimmer and know whether it was on or off. The one in the middle, it's got a switch and a dimmer, maybe a little confusing. And the one on the right, same thing as well. You've got a switch and a dimmer. So it's nice that you could dim the light, and it dims, it creates moods, it saves energy, but it becomes a little more confusing, and it doesn't work well with three-ways. I'm going to assume everybody knows what we mean by a three-way switch. That's two switches that turn on one fixture. Classic example is on the stairs. So then we did multiple lighting circuits. Awesome, right? We love these. I'm not a kitchen designer, I'm not an interior designer, and I'm not a lighting designer. But wow, what an amazing tool that we've added to do moods and really, really change the whole look of a room. We started doing it in the 1940s. Instead of just having one light in a room, we put multiple lights in a room. And it's more widely used than ever. Now it happens in every room all the time, right? The kitchen is the best example in any room in the house of the most number of lighting circuits. It is really easy to have a whole lot of lighting circuits. And you guys can probably think of some other ones beyond this, but it's not uncommon to have a sink light, a light for the stove, lighting for the main cooking area, lighting for the main eating area, a light fixture for the island, for the kitchen table, under cabinet, inner cabinet, over cabinet, kick lighting, which is becoming more popular than ever. I personally really like it. And then various accent lighting. So if you put that all together, you can create some amazing moods and scenes. And if you combine that with dimming, you change your room from one thing to something amazing. And that's what you guys do. That's what kitchen designers, that's where your magic lies, right? It makes the rooms look better. It makes the rooms work better. However, the in the tech world, UI, user interface, it's a poor UI, and it creates a lot of wall acne. Here's some pictures that I've taken of jobs that I've went to personally and said, look at this. This is, not only is it ugly, it's pretty confusing, and it doesn't dim. Yes, these are real. I didn't Photoshop these. These actually exist in homes where this just ended up. And without a plan, this is what you'll end up with. So let's talk about the future kitchen. I've seen some great photos, and I loved researching what the future kitchen was thought of back in the 1950s, because that's about the time that we've changed, where the kitchen was not a separate room where we eat and where we cook. And I'm telling you something you guys all probably know, but it's really important to understand what the byproducts of this were. So we went to open floor plans. We removed the doors. We opened up doorways, and in comes the kitchen island. I remember going to my grandma's house, and she had a kitchen, and there was a room off to it where you ate breakfast, and there was a room off to the other side where it was the dining room. Nobody ate in the kitchen. Everybody sat in a room separate than where the food was made. And here's some pictures I found, and I think these are pretty cool, because here's the future kitchen in the 1950s. And you can see we just start to get the island, right? This little thing on the side here, and we start to get the island. And here's another one. Look at this picture with the phone and the table. I think that's really telling, because that picture is actually from the late 1940s. So they already realized that you were going to do business and you were going to have your office in the kitchen. He's got his phone there. He's got his pen. He might as well, you know, that's an office. Back then, you didn't have a laptop. I think that's really telling of where we were trying to go. And then you can see on the other picture on the other side where the island started to come in. And I think it's very telling of how we got here. But it had some negative byproducts. So we used more multiple lighting circuits than ever, because we kind of took 2 rooms or 3 rooms and made them one. We needed 3-ways all over the place. In fact, it became building code that you had to have 3-ways, right? And of course, as we know, the kitchen became the hub of the home. Well, next thing happened was Star Wars. And there's really nothing negative about Star Wars. The adoption of Star Wars started in the 1970s, and it still goes on today. The lightsaber has many, many uses. It's a portable light. You can cut your toast and make bread at the same time. I'm sorry, you can cut your bread and make toast at the same time. You can mow the lawn, the bushes, or the hedges. I personally use mine to make my coffee in the morning, and you can ward off those pesky Dark Lords if you need to. What are some other improvements that we've made to lighting? We talked about the 3-way circuit. Panelized lighting. If you guys don't know what panelized lighting is, throw it in the chat right now and we can get into that a little bit. Halogen lighting was developed. Fluorescent lighting was developed, even though we really didn't like it. And then we came up with the intelligent and the radio frequency dimmer. One of the things that happened about, I'm getting a lot of questions here about panelized lighting. Okay, so panelized lighting is something that became popular probably about 30 years ago. It was very commonly used in commercial. and it moved its way to residential once again about 30 years ago. So instead of having a light that connected to a dimmer, that connected to a power source, you took all the lights in the entire home, you ran them to a big module in the basement, and you then put something on the wall that looked like a dimmer, but it just sent commands back to the panel and turned on and off lights. So that way you had the ability to have any dimmer control any light. And it started to really help people create lighting scenes. Panelized lighting was the first thing that allowed people to press one button and a whole bunch of lights go to the right level. So it's not done in retrofits typically. It's typically done in new construction or in major renovations. And it's called panelized lighting because you have a big giant metal panel that all of the lights in the home or all the lights in part of the home go to, so that the device on the wall isn't directly connected to the light. I don't know if that helps at all. It's also very beneficial in making three-ways a lot simpler. And I see a question in here asking about why is it called the three-way when it's only two switches? There is a technical answer why about the wiring. It doesn't really matter. And whether you have two switches, three switches, four switches, or 12 switches that control one light, it's called a three-way. That's the name of the circuit wiring. And we've seen this, right? Where you sometimes have 3 or 4 light switches that control one light. And you can live in a house 30 years and go up to it and you're like, which, do I press it up or do I press it down today? I don't know, you know? I mean, I used to make a joke and say, we'll have a row of switches and take a Post-it note and stick it on there and say, okay, this is the button I press for that light. And if you come down the next day, you'll have to press it the other way. So panelized lighting works really, really well for high voltage lights. So the question is it dead? It's still sold. Lots of manufacturers make it. I still occasionally install it for people, but its primary use is for high voltage lighting. And you'll see later on in this presentation about why it's kind of going away. I'll take a quick moment here to see if there are any other questions. Wait for a couple to come through. I see there's a few. Getting a lot of questions about lightsabers. Okay. Now we move on to the light emitting diode, the LED. And this is really, really misunderstood. So we call the power that's in our house high voltage. It's typically 110 to 120 volts in the US, and it's about double that in most of the rest of the world. But we're just going to call that high voltage power. LEDs are low voltage, period. End of story. They're low voltage and they're DC. They're typically 24 volts DC. And once again, the power that comes out of your house is typically 110 volts AC. So they require a transformer. Something's got to transform the power that comes out of your house into low voltage DC to run this diode or LED. The lighting world likes to call this transformer a driver, and I disagree with that terminology. That's not correct. It's a transformer. I think the word driver is used for marketing reasons. But transformers, LED diode itself, the element, is very, very, very efficient. You can make a whole lot of light with a little bit of power, and that's amazing. But the transformer itself isn't as efficient. The transformer that converts the power down to low voltage loses power in the process. That's the laws of physics. You cannot transform something without having some sort of loss. Transformers make heat. That's what they lose. That's their inefficiency. And I don't understand why when everybody puts hi-hats in the ceiling, they put the transformers in the ceiling. Why would you want all that heat floating around in your ceiling? It doesn't really make any sense. Another negative thing about LEDs is color degradation. So a lot of people aren't familiar with this, but think about it like a fluorescent light bulb. When you put a fluorescent light bulb in and it's not dead yet, but you can look at it and you're like, well, the color quality is worse than what I put it in. And you can see the color quality degrading. LEDs have the same exact issue, but we don't typically notice it because their life is so long that the degradation happens more slowly. So when you buy an LED now and you put it in your home or you put it in a project, the way it looks now is probably not the way it's going to look in 5 or 10 years, depending on how many hours that LED is used. But it'll happen so slowly that you probably won't notice it as fast as you did a fluorescence. LEDs are only available in red, green, and blue. Yes, they're only available in red, green, and blue. We'll get into this more later on. And LED diodes do not dim. They are on or they are off. Now, I know people are going to say, I've seen LEDs that are not red, green, or blue, and I've seen ones that'll dim. I will explain that. A driver is somebody that works for Uber. A transformer is something that you connect to a light. So these are examples of transformers. Pretty much all lighting manufacturers do not manufacture transformers. They buy them from a transformer company. This is one very, very, very popular transformer company that a lot of lighting companies purchase products from. And I purchased these transformers directly from them as well. Why would we want to put a transformer on every single light? If we put 20 hi-hats in a room or 200 hi-hats in a home or more, that means we have to put 200 transformers and 200 transformers inside a ceiling. This just doesn't make sense, but this is what I see time and time and time again. Why not use one transformer or one transformer bank for a whole home, or if it's a really large home, for one floor? So I'll take an example real quick. If I have all of the lights in a home or in a project are going to use, let's just say 1,000 watts, I'm going to put in 3 500-watt transformers. I'm going to stack them all together. That's 3 transformers. Any one of them could go bad, and I still have 100% power, right? But if we assume in my example here, 25 lights at 20 watts each, that's 500 watts. A 500-watt transformer started around $75. You can get more expensive ones, but as a nice round number, they start around $75. A 20-watt transformer is about $20. They start at somewhere around 20 bucks. But you're probably going to get that transformer with the light fixture that you purchase. And that means that lighting company, they're not going to pass that through to you. They're going to upcharge it. Sometimes they're going to put their sticker on it, be that somebody else's transformer, they just put their sticker on it with their name on it. They're going to upcharge you for that transformer if you purchase it from the lighting company. And remember, they don't make it. They're buying that from somebody else. But if we do some quick math, we can buy 500 watts of power in a single transformer for about 15 cents a watt. Whereas if we buy 20 transformers at $20 each, that's $1 a watt. That's a massive difference. And it's actually more reliable to have a small bank of transformers instead of ones all in the ceiling. I'm gonna talk about something else real quick. Let's talk about one light that goes bad. Somebody says, oh, I got a light that went bad in my ceiling. It doesn't work. All the rest of them work. Well, what's wrong? Well, if it's an LED light, the diode probably didn't go bad. The diodes last a long time. They sometimes go bad. There's manufacturing problems, but they probably didn't burn out because they're probably not old enough for them to fail yet. So what failed? Well, what failed was probably 99% chance the transformer that's inside it. So what do? You go up, you pull the fixture out, you pull the transformer off, you go down to the local electrical supply house, or you call up that manufacturer and say, hey, do you have one of these? And maybe you bought that fixture 5 years ago. And they go, what do you know? We do. Awesome. 50 bucks, 75 bucks. And you're happy that you got a transformer that's 5 years old in technology. For diodes to become more efficient, for us to use less power in our home, the LEDs are already massively efficient. Massively efficient. For us to get more efficiency out of these systems, we have to use a more efficient transformer. And they're constantly coming out with new transformers that are more efficient. So if you went and put all LED fixtures in your house and you wanted to make it more efficient, changing the fixture isn't going to make nearly as much of a difference as changing the transformer. And if you use a central transformer, 2 or 3 transformers in a closet, in a basement, in an attic, you can just change those black boxes. You haven't changed a single light in your house. Even if it didn't go bad, you can go 5 years down the road, change that transformer, and you've now improved massively the efficiency in your home, and you've never had to go up into the ceiling. I'm getting a question here. I've been told to spec a transformer larger than I actually need. Is this true? Well, it can't hurt, right? Transformers are typically measured in voltage and wattage, right? So if you need a 24-volt transformer, you can put, and you only need 20 watts of power, whether you use a 20-watt transformer or a 2,000-watt transformer, it will work. Now, is it a waste of money? Probably. You only need what you need, right? Most lighting manufacturers, when they say their fixture draws 20 watts of power, they typically draw a little less. I've taken a lot of fixtures and measured them. They actually build a buffer into the amount of power that it consumes because they want you to spec a transformer at least that size. So if your fixture is rated correctly, you can probably use exactly the size transformer that is spec'd, and you'll be absolutely fine. I'm getting a question about if I buy a home and then just replace the bulbs with LED ones. Every LED has a transformer. So when you buy these bulbs, these LED retrofit bulbs, there's a transformer inside there. And that's, it's the same thing. And we're going to go into that in a little bit, but it is difficult to use centralized transformers in a retrofit job. It's just not, it's not an easy thing to do. And sometimes you have to use those retrofit bulbs and retrofit fixtures. And there are other ways around that. We can talk about that in a minute. They have their own problems, you know what I mean? So, but yes, if you buy a good old fashioned, whether it's a really expensive one or a really cheap one, retrofit thread and bulb, inside that bulb is a transformer and a controller, which we'll go into next. So let's talk about the diode itself, right? I said before, there's no such thing as a white LED. The red and green LEDs have been around for decades. On my VCR in the 1980s, on my tape deck in the 1980s, I had a red and green LED on them, it was when you pressed play or record, they had red LEDs on them, right? In 2014, the Nobel Prize for Physics was given out to a trio of scientists from Japan and the United States because they invented the blue LED. Now, if we have red and we have green, we can only make so many colors. One of the colors we cannot make is white. When we add blue to red and green, we get white. So I wrote here, RGB equals white-ish. Because if you combine red, green, and blue together in exactly the same ratio, a third, a third, and a third, we hit the middle of this color triangle. That's mathematically correct white. It doesn't mean it's the white that you like. It doesn't mean it's the white that you want. People use the terms warm and cool, and they use all these temperature things. And those are a little misunderstood. First of all, warm and cool it's not mathematical. It's a way you feel, and that's great. But we really want to focus on the very center of this color grid. We have a really small window in the color spectrum for white. So as we move to the corners of the triangle, we have extreme colors. And when we combine them together, we have a really, really tiny window to get our whites. So the thing is if we slightly edit the ratio of red, green, and blue, we slightly get a different white. So when I'm talking to my clients and they say, well, I don't really care about RGB. I don't need my kitchen to be red, green, and blue. Well, if you have the ability to do red, green, and blue, you then have the ability to, if you can do any color, you can then do any color white. And this is really important. Yes, making your kitchen red, green, and blue is probably fun once a year on 4th of July, maybe on Christmas, whatever. But the ability to control the color gives you the ability to dial in any color white you want. Buying a fixture at a fixed color or fixed white, oh, I want a 2700, I want a 3500, doesn't make any sense to me, because that means you're buying a fixture with the diodes pre-ratioed, unchangeable, except over time. Because after a few years, the color quality will degrade. All LEDs do this. And people say, oh, but I'm going to buy good quality ones. Most of them come out of the same manufacturer. The fixture is made by one company, the diode is made by somebody else. And they will degrade over time. And then you'll have a different color temperature than you bought. So I really believe in the ability to control the diodes individually inside the fixture. Does anybody have any questions on this? I know this is pretty mathematical engineering-ish.
Keith, it's Deb.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are some questions here. Do you want me to
Okay.
go through them?
Sure.
Okay, so Amy's asking, is it true that I should spec one transformer for one group of lights, like under cabinet lights on one switch? For example, I didn't think I could put both the under cabinet lights and internal cabinet lights on the same transformer if I wanted them switched differently. Thoughts on that?
You know what? I'm absolutely going to address that in the next couple slides, and
Okay,
that's a great
perfect.
question. And I've got, if my next couple slides don't answer it, then shame on me.
Okay, and then there is one here from Jane about why are some light fixtures LED fixtures? What's the difference between buying this and putting an LED bulb in a regular light fixture?
Massively. And actually, those two questions are connected. So if you buy a bulb, I would never recommend somebody buying an incandescent fixture and threading an LED bulb. Now, mind you, if your home exists and your lights are all done and you're not doing any renovations, sure, that's the way to go. It's probably one of your only options without But on new projects and new construction, if you're putting in new fixtures, put in LED fixtures, not incandescent fixtures with LED bulbs, because that means that bulb has the transformer inside of it. And in a minute, my next couple slides, you'll see you don't want to dim the input to the transformer. You don't want to put the transformer in the ceiling, even if it's inside the bulb. And you don't want to run high voltage wires to low voltage fixtures. So I've seen that commonly where people have said, I'm just going to put in good old fashioned, cheapy cans, and then they can thread in any bulb later on. Let me know if that helps.
Thanks a lot, Keith.
Cool. So before we move on, what's the score, right? We've gone from having candles to now having wiring in our home, multiple fixtures in our home, dimmers, three-ways, open architecture. We've advanced in so many ways. However, we've actually broken a lot of stuff. We now have poorer color than we had. Everybody loves the color that you get out of a gas lamp. Dimming on LEDs, I'm sure you guys have had problems. It's sometimes difficult to use. You've got banks of switches, and the design has gotten worse because now we have wall acne all over the place. So all of the advancements we haven't fixed a lot of the problems yet. So we have to look at this differently. Here is the slide to address the question from before. This is the old way of thinking. When we used high voltage lighting and incandescent lights, we had 120 volts AC, it went to a high voltage dimmer, and then that went to the light. But now what people have been doing is they're sending the high voltage dimmer to, oops, I skipped a slide. They're sending the high voltage dimmer to the transformer. Transformers don't like to dim. They want to be on 100%. I know you guys know this. Here's why. I bet you've all heard them hum. Have you ever run a dimmer and heard a humming noise? That's the transformer screaming for help. It's saying, I don't like what you're doing to me. Since LEDs don't dim, they're only on or off. How do we make it seem like they dim? We use time. Turn an LED on and off 50% of the time, but do it so fast that you can't see it, and you'll get 50% of the output. When you've seen LEDs dim properly on a low voltage system, this is what they're doing. They're not dimming. They're using something called PWM, pulse width modulation. They're pulsing the diode on and off. And if you've ever seen a car commercial, because most LED lights in cars are LEDs, and they do that slow motion shot, you'll see the lights flashing because you can catch this on video. So dimming an LED properly, dimming, is by turning it on and off. Transformers can't turn on and off quickly. So dimming them doesn't make any sense. This is the old-fashioned way of doing it. People have continued to use the old-fashioned, the high voltage methodology on low voltage lights, and it simply doesn't work. Here is the right way. Now, I'm using an example of an LED tape here, but whether it's an LED tape or a hi-hat or any LED fixture, it doesn't matter. You take the power out of the transformer, you go into something called a controller. In this case, we're using a DMX controller. DMX is just a language. We'll get into that in a minute, but it's not new. It's been around since 1980. And then you send pulses to the individual diodes. And now, if you send no pulses, if you just send straight 24 volts, that's 100% on. That's 100% output. Great. If you pulse it, then you have less output and it dims. And now you can control each level of the red, green, and blue diodes. So now you can create any amount of intensity and any color you'd like. I have a question here about what's a hi-hat, a recessed light, a light fixture that's built into the ceiling. So the question is who's going to do this, right? How does this get accomplished in your projects? And before I get into the next slide, so who does this? And I was talking with Debbie about this before the presentation, and I think the interior designers, the kitchen designers, they design a beautiful space. And typically I would then recommend going to a professional lighting designer that would just does lighting. They don't do interior design. They don't do kitchen design. I've had a lot of people tell me, well, I do the lighting design. And you know what? Maybe you have training in that. Maybe you have expertise in that. But I don't find a lot of people do. I don't, right? I don't want to pick what the fixture should look like. There's a lot of science in it. How high your ceiling is, what the beam angle should be, what you're trying to accent in the project. So typically for projects that go well, I notice the interior designer or the kitchen designer passes their design off to the lighting designer. There's some interaction there, right? There's some dialogue there. The two artists talk. The lighting designer puts forth a lighting fixture plan. That's then handed to me, and I do the back end as an integrator. I do the back end of figuring out the technology of making it work and making it dim properly and using the right transformers and creating the right interface. So some good practices are use true low voltage fixtures. And I ask this all the time. I'll ask, somebody, a lighting manufacturer or an interior designer or even lighting designers, is it a low voltage fixture? And they say, sure, it's a low voltage fixture. And I say, how come there's two high voltage wires coming off of it then? Then it's not a low voltage fixture. Just because it has a low voltage diode inside of it doesn't make it a low voltage fixture. What makes it a low voltage fixture is you have two low voltage wires coming off it and there's no transformer inside. So run low voltage wire for low voltage fixtures. Run 4-conductor. Why? Because you need 4 conductors, one common wire, one for red, one for green, and one for blue. Run 4 wires and you can control red, green, and blue. Centralize the transformers. Put all the transformers in one location. Basement, closet, attic, wherever. Don't put them at the fixture. Dim using PWM, pulse width modulation. Dim by pulsing the LEDs on or off. You cannot see it. It's invisible to you, except that you have really nice linear dimming without transformers humming, without flickering, without things pulsing on and off. Use an installer that has experience with low voltage LEDs, not installing high voltage LEDs like the classic electrician does. Use color control for circadian rhythms. I'm getting asked more and more and more about circadian rhythms because even before this pandemic, people's homes were starting to be their healthy place. So circadian rhythms, if you don't know, is about the color temperatures changing during the day to coincide with your sleep and awake patterns. And it works. It's not voodoo. It's amazing. Use RGB, right? RGB or WW. So RGB is red, green, blue. WW is hot white, cool white. So use RGB or tunable white tape everywhere. Tape is a great use of light. You don't see the tape. Under cabinet, inner cabinet, kick lighting, accent lighting. Take your crown molding, move it down a quarter of an inch and fill it with tape. You don't see the fixture, but you get great light. Consider using a lighting designer to spec the lights correctly for the work that you guys do for these beautiful kitchens you design, and then consider using an integrator. I'm an integrator. An integrator is the person that takes care of the technology to make all of the lighting work correctly. We do a lot of installation. We do a lot of software programming. This is some examples of photos that I've actually taken in homes. This is not a good user interface. It's ugly and it's complicated. And yes, these are real. And they happen when you do not have a plan. If you do not have a plan, this will occur. More and more and more things will show up on your wall. Do not let people put anything on your wall that isn't simple and beautiful. Here's some other ones. I'll whip through these. Here's some other ones. This is done by even people in my industry with lighting systems. They're just done poorly. What's a good user interface? Make it grandma friendly. If you have to take notes on how to use it, it's not done well. 2 gangs, max. 1, 2 gangs on a wall, that's it. What you think you want is probably slightly different than what the homeowner wants. Use scene-based control. You do not need control over every fixture. Create lighting scenes, create buttons to do them. KISS. Keep it simple. And the rule of 99%. I believe when you go press the top button that says kitchen, if you press that button before the sun rises, it should go to one scene. If you press it after the sun rises, it should go to another scene. If you press it at dusk, it should go to another scene. If you press it at 3 o'clock in the morning to raise your fridge, it should go to another scene. And it's one button. One button should get you the scene that you want in that room 99% of the time with one button. And it's simple input to output. We know what zip code you're in. We know which way the windows are facing. We know if the sun's up or down. We know what time of the year it is. And we can use that and output the correct lighting scene. It's simple input to output. To me, as a software guy, that's what we do. And that's what makes it simple. Somebody asked what a gang is. These are examples of 2 of them are single gangs and 1 of them is the double gang. So a gang is a simple, what a dimmer is, right? One dimmer or 1 outlet is a gang. So these are examples of what I think is done well. What I think is done well is because when you look at it, you know exactly what it does with no instructions. Whether it's putting the window shades up and down, whether it's turning the lights on, you know what it does. This is what we should use. And people are asking about brand names. Maybe we'll talk about that in Q&A because I'm just about finished. Here we go. So I'm sure I went a little long. I apologize, guys. Please fire away with any questions you have. The first question I have is coming up about brand names. Don't get caught up in brand names. Do not get caught up on brand names. The brand names are the groceries. A good design is way more important. You can go buy a part from a great manufacturer, but if it's programmed wrong and installed wrong and designed wrong, it's not a great output. New construction, let's see here.
Keith, I see a question here from Christina. It says, how does this relate to Wi-Fi LED lighting?
Okay, so Wi-Fi LED lighting. So you would never use wireless in new construction. You wouldn't use wireless in new construction. There is no reason to do it. Wireless is for things that walk around. Wireless is for things that walk around. This is wireless. Now, some people have to use wireless because it's a retrofit and they're not putting in new fixtures, they're not running new wires. So you can create, so if you use a Wi-Fi fixture, you basically take the dimmers out 100%. And the lights are on all the time. They always have power. And then you put a device on the wall, like was in my last slide, and you press a button, and it sends a command to the light to go on to a certain level or color, things like that. So you can create really good lighting through wireless, but it will take an expert to do it. You're going to need somebody that understands the Wi-Fi. You're going to need somebody that understands how to rewire and bypass the high voltage dimmer, because you don't want to put a high voltage dimmer on an intelligent light. That doesn't work. I'm seeing a question about high quality LED fixtures and pair them with compatible Lutron Maestro dimmers. So that's the wrong way to do it, and I apologize. If you're using a high voltage, if you're using an LED, you should not connect it to a high voltage dimmer. That's the example of the slide when I said this doesn't work. It's a Band-Aid. It won't work well. Why would you use a high voltage dimmer on a low voltage fixture? Inherently, that's thought of, that's misunderstood. What you would use is pulse width modulation, where you dim after the transformer. And if you're doing retrofit, that's when you would start to use wireless bulbs.
Well, Keith, the questions are coming in now. Should I read some to you?
Sure. I'm seeing one about ELV or MLV dimmers.
Yep, go ahead.
That's old school thinking. High voltage dimmers are for high voltage lights. High voltage dimmers, whether they're MLV, ELV, all the different variants of dimmers, go put them on an incandescent bulb. That's what they're meant for. Use low voltage pulse width modulation on a LED bulb, or run low voltage to it.
Okay, here's a question from Jane about how does kick plate lighting work? Does it have to be wired in?
Everything has to be wired. Everything needs power. Whether you run high voltage or low voltage, unless it runs on a battery, everything needs a wire.
Okay, and here's one from, I don't know who it's from, but it's it says, in an older home, are you suggesting installing a transformer for lighting?
So I don't know the situation if you're doing a renovation. If you're doing a big renovation, run low voltage wire, yes. If you're using LED lights and you are doing a renovation or new construction, absolutely install an external transformer and run low voltage wire, period.
Okay, one from Amy. She says, I love the idea of how you suggest one button. Should it do all based on the time of day? But I'm wondering how it can be overridden in certain cases, like I suddenly need to clean a huge mess at midnight when raiding the fridge. How do you get both convenience and ease of adjustment to the norm?
Awesome question. I love it. So we call it the rule of 99% because it covers you 99% of the time. And you're asking me about the 1%. So we do something pretty simple. If you press that button, it goes to what you want 99% of the time. But yeah, when you come home at 3 o'clock in the morning and you don't want the lights to be on to raid the fridge, you want them to be on to clean up, press and hold.
Simple. Okay. Karen says, I have found there to be a big range in the good, better, best in LED. How can we best determine if a product is good quality, and what kind of issues do the low quality solutions have, so I can explain this to my client and why they have to pay more?
So, and once again, I'm not a lighting designer. That question would be unbelievably well answered by a lighting designer. And if you employ a lighting designer on your projects will look better. And so if you get a true low voltage fixture where you can control red, green, and blue independently, you're pretty safe regardless of the price, right? After that, what you're paying for is, you're not paying for a better diode, you're paying for a better housing, right? You can go get a great fixture that's true low voltage fixture for, $50 to $100, a hi-hat, for example. You can then get that same electronic guts inside of a fixture that's $500. What's the difference? Well, the $500 one is gorgeous. It's not plastic. It's probably trimless. It probably comes with mud-in rings and all sorts of other things. It's probably not the diode or the electronics inside. As you pay more money, you pay more for the fixture and the housing. That's fine. You're pretty safe technology-wise if you use a true low voltage fixture that has low voltage wires of it without the transformer or the driver built into it.
Great. Jaylene says, this is the first time I've heard of an integrator. Besides your company, how prevalent is this position in the market? And for example, you're on the East Coast. Are these individuals all over the country?
So this particular seminar is sponsored by Control4. Control4 is an integration platform. You can go to the Control4 website and you can find dealers all over the country. If you haven't heard of an integrator, in the past, we were called the AV guy. And now we find that offensive because we do so much more than that.
That's great. Thank you. And yes, thank you, Danielle, for putting that in there. Smart
Thanks,
Home
Danielle.
Pro
Hi.
at Control4. And then Pablo has a question here for you, Keith. In your experience, are most licensed electricians familiar with this type of lighting specification?
No.
Oh, well then
How direct can I be?
it's very direct. So then what do you suggest about trying to find an electrician that might know some of this?
Well, what happens, I can go through what happens in my world, right? So I'll walk into a project and maybe I'm hired to do, maybe my company is hired to do the wiring. Maybe we're not. Sometimes the electrician is going to do the wiring, even if it's low voltage. That's just the deal. That's the project. So then the manufacturer, the lighting designer, or the AV integrator have to then supply a schematic, i.e. education, to the electrician and say, wire it like this. As we work with the same electricians over and over again, they start to get it. If they don't want to get it or they don't want to do low voltage, we do the wiring. It's low voltage wiring, so we can do it without an electrician's license.
Okay, great. I'm not seeing any other questions at the moment, so maybe I'll wait for another moment to see if there are any more. And
I'm disappointed. I hope I was going to make more questions than that.
There are, well, maybe somebody's writing. Here's one. Let's see. So then if you have a true LED housing, are the bulbs different than the ones I'm using to replace my old incandescent bulbs? What are the bulbs called that go into a true LED housing and not a retrofit?
So once again, if you're going to buy a new fixture, right? Say, oh great, I'm going to go buy. I want new lights in my kitchen, or I'm designing a new kitchen for yourself or for a client. If you can buy a fixture that's LED, or you can buy a fixture with an Edison thread. If you buy a fixture with an Edison thread, it's meant to get an incandescent bulb or a retrofit LED. This is not what I recommend. The only time you'd use a retrofit bulb is in a retrofit situation. I don't know if I'm answering the question
I think
correctly,
so.
if they understood that.
I hope so. Let's see, there is one more question here from Angela. At what point, and this is a good one, I think, at what point in the project do we give you a call or someone like yourself for integration services and support?
So we've been involved at the last minute. We've been involved before, the first shovel was dug in the ground, right? The jobs that go well, the jobs that go smoothly, everybody's happy, and they work and look the best in the end, they go something like this. Somebody designs the kitchen. That design then goes to a professional lighting designer, right? We work with professional lighting designers. There's some amazing people out there that do such a great job at it. They then use the beauty of your design and put their touch on it as a lighting designer. Then typically that lighting design is given to me, the integrator, where I then give a quote for all the light fixtures, all the electronics it needs to run it. And mind you, some of the lights, maybe if it's a chandelier, that's going to be installed by the electrician. If it's a low voltage light, it's probably going to be installed by me. But at that point, everybody knows what they're doing. So you're the kitchen and bath designer, interior designer, then goes to the lighting, works with the lighting designer, then goes to the integrator.
Okay. So Shauna wants to know, LED pot lights are typically inexpensive now. And I just tell my customers when it dies, which is a long time from now, to just replace the whole fixture. Am I right?
I'm not sure how to answer that. I mean, on high-end kitchens, probably don't use a Home Depot fixture, right? I mean, if you want a beautiful result, Home Depot probably doesn't have they have a meat and potatoes, right? There are some really awesome fixtures out there. I like trimless, but that's me. Some people don't, you know?
Okay. And then the person that was asking earlier about the retrofitting and the LED housings, they're asking, is there a different name for the bulb that isn't a retrofit? I just see the name LED on the box.
I'm not sure if I understand the question. I apologize.
That's okay. I think they're trying to figure out whether or not, let's see, what are the bulbs called that go into a true LED housing and not a retrofit? I think the person wants to know, she said they see, or this person
You
says,
don't buy the bulb, you buy
okay,
the fixture.
okay,
It's one, I wish I had one here, I could hold it up. But you buy the fixture, and the fixture has the diode, which is the bulb. In the LED world, we don't call it a bulb anymore, we call it a diode. So, or the element. The fixture has the element in it.
okay, perfect. And then Danielle, I know she's in the audience. Thank you, Danielle, for answering one of the questions here. She's saying, ideally, the earlier the better is when to bring an integrator onto the project team. They can sometimes help give insight into how to solve some project pain points early on.
Well said, Danielle. I mean, a lot of integrators like myself. So if somebody comes to me and says, hey, we're redoing a kitchen, we're thinking about redoing a kitchen, the first question I'll ask is do you have a lighting designer? If they say yes, great. If they say no, I say, I have some that I work with. I would really recommend you do it. I would really recommend you get with them.
Okay. So here's the question from Angela. Can you give an example of the cost of integration services? Like describe the extent of a project and what that project might cost?
You know, it would be really, I mean, it would be really difficult to do that not knowing the project. You know, I mean, listen, we've all worked on kitchens that were hundreds of thousands of dollars. We've all worked on kitchens that weren't. So it's absolutely a case-by-case basis. All I'll say is it costs a whole lot less than doing it wrong and having to do it over.
That makes sense. So we keep coming
I've gone
back.
into a lot of jobs where people like, my kitchen's making noise, it flickers, I don't know what's going on. You know, I've heard that a million times.
Okay. We keep coming back to this question about, a couple people keep asking it, about the LED and changing out the bulb. Is it better to change out the whole fixture instead of what they're calling the bulb?
So if you're doing a new project, you would buy a fixture that has the element built into it. And if the element would very, 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 very rarely go bad. It is just almost unheard of. And if it did, you would change either, depending on the manufacturer, you just pop out the fixture and swap it, or they would send you a new element for inside the fixture. It could go either way. But in the world of LEDs, in new construction, there's no thread in bulbs.
Okay. All right. So then here's a question. Where can you go to be trained as a lighting designer and then as an integrator?
So as an integrator, the governing body of that is called CEDIA, CEDIA. That's Custom Electronics Designers Integrators Association, which I am a member of. And as a lighting designer, I don't really, I think there's a National Light Association. I don't know because I'm not one.
Pablo saying IES. So thanks, Pablo. And then
Thanks,
so
Pablo.
Then, and then so yeah, so people are asking about, how do you find a lighting designer? So perhaps at IES then.
And if you're working with a good, first of all, integrators are easy to find. You can go to the Control4 website, like Danielle said. You can find a pro in my area, and you can find Control4 isn't the only manufacturer. It's a manufacturer that I deal with a lot, and I think their product is great. But if you find, but all integrators, just like all kitchen designers and just like all electricians, aren't the same. So if you find a good integrator, they will have a relationship with a good lighting designer.
Okay. And then
I've
go ahead,
worked
I'm
with some
sorry.
lighting designers that were just amazing.
So Doug put in here IALD as well as professional organization for that. So Pablo put the
Okay.
the ies.org in here for us. And then I'm just going to take this one final question, Keith, because we are a couple minutes over.
Okay.
Jennifer's asking, how much of the total budget should be allocated for projects? It always seems that lighting is the last thing thought about and has the lowest percentage. How can we influence the amount of the budget for lighting? Any ideas?
Get a lighting designer involved soon. That's, you know what, you're absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. I think one of the problems is typically it goes to the architect first a lot of times, and maybe some of you are architects, and they just draw some circles. They draw some circles and draw a line, and they go, okay, fine, put it out to bid. It's out to bid at that point, and there's just some generic fixture, which is and not a complete plan. And then the problem is then you start doing, you say, well, don't you want to do different lighting? Don't you want trimless? Don't you want under cabinet? Well, none of that was in the plan. So none of that was in the bid. And then the customers wonder why they went over. So get it in the design early.
Great information, Keith. I wish we could keep going, but I know we're kind of pressed for time. I know you can, but anyway, a lot of people are saying excellent presentation. Thanks so much. And I do have to wrap this, but I do want to thank you, Keith. This has been really informative. You've really given us a lot of great information today. And I really appreciate that you shared your time and expertise with all of us. And thanks to all of you out there and to Control4 for sponsoring today's session, as well as all of our February sessions. Again, thank you very much, Keith.
If you guys have any other questions, my contact information is up there. Feel free to reach out to me.
Have a great day.